قليلون اليوم يمتلكون القدرة على وصل الجغرافيا السياسية بالأسواق والسلوك الإنساني بتدفقات رأس المال وتحويل التقلبات إلى فرص كما يفعل ضيفي. رؤاه أصبحت بوصلة تسترشد بها الحكومات ومديرو الأصول والمستثمرون على اختلافهم. رحلة محمد العريان الشخصية تكشف ليس فقط عن عقل لامع بل عن صلابة وقيادة وشغف لا يهدأ لفهم العالم والسعي الدائم إلى تحسينه. سأتحدث مع محمد العريان اليوم عن مستقبل النظام المالي العالمي وعن القيادة تحت الضغط وعن النجاح والإرث الإنساني. أهلاً بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من حديث مع صبا. Well, Muhammad Al-Aryan, no pressure on me. Thank you for taking this. Did you always, growing up, know that you were smarter than other people around you?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Not did I ever think I was smarter than anybody growing up. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody now. What I am good at is being intellectually curious and asking questions and trying to understand other people's perspectives.
Were you pushed towards being more curious? Were you pushed towards needing to know more, wanting to know more?
I think an event that really impacted me in this regard was when I was 13 years old. My father was in the diplomatic service. He had just been transferred to Paris, France. And every morning we would get 4 different newspapers that go from right to left in terms of political spectrum. And my father insisted that we read all 4 newspapers. And I want you to imagine a 13-year-old who had no interest in reading one newspaper, let alone 4 newspapers. So I started negotiating with my father.
Okay.
And I said, look, I'll read one newspaper because there's no point in reading other newspapers because the news is the news. So if I read one, that should be enough. And his response to me, that to this day still influences me, is no. The interpretation of the news varies. And unless you read the different perspectives, you won't be well informed. And that really had an impact on me at a very young age.
But it's not just the curiosity and the knowledge or just your father. You seem to be a perfectionist. You like to take something all the way. You're very good at sports. You were captain of your football at college, university, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky in the sense that I've been given opportunities. When I captain, I remember it's an election for who captains the football team. And I remember going to the meeting, never thinking that I was going to be a candidate, thinking who else in the room am I voting for? And then next thing I know, it was a secret vote and I came on top. So I've been very lucky to be given these opportunities.
Tell me, what do you think? What is intelligence?
That's a really difficult question because right now there's a lot of work being done on artificial intelligence and what the destination is or the aspiration is, which is artificial general intelligence. And different people in that field define intelligence differently. I don't like the word intelligence as much as I like the word, are you inclusive or not? So I have friends, 4 of them, that are Nobel Prize winners. So they are the top of their profession. One of them makes you smarter. The other 3 use their brilliance to put you down.
Ooh.
Okay. And I think my definition of intelligence is an ability to make other people smarter by trying to understand where they come from and helping them think through their issues.
So I know that you are enthusiastic about artificial intelligence. I know you're optimistic about it because you see that it actually improves productivity, as you had said. What is the one economic assumption that AI is likely to break?
That's a great question. Most people ask a different question is, what is the one economic issue that AI is likely to impact? And I say productivity. What AI is likely to break is organization, how things are organized. You have to think differently. So often I sit with people who realize that AI is very important, that it will change not what they do, but how they do it. But the approach to AI is an add-on. We're simply going to put it on top. A bit like when you buy a car and you get an accessory. No, if you want to take the advantage of artificial intelligence, you have to ask a question that's very difficult. What would we look like if we were born AI native? So give me all your characteristics today and assume that you were born AI native. And when you ask that question, you realize it's a fundamental change in how things are organized. And so that's the one word that I think it would disrupt, is how we've organized activities.
So what concerns you about AI? What are you worried about with the advent of the applications of AI?
So I'm worried about two things. One is what I call the 80-20 equation. 80% of AI is positive, 20% is negative. And the negative can be really negative. So the first thing that concerns me is that we don't fall in love too much with the 80 without risk management to 20. And it's possible. Most of the things we do involve a certain amount of risk management. So that's the first issue. The second issue that worries me is mindsets. People underestimate how important mindsets is. Too many companies think of AI as cost minimization. I'm going to get rid of labor. AI, the power of AI is not in labor displacement, it's in labor enhancement. It's making your existing labor more productive. That is the power. But the easy shortcut is to think only of displacement and not of enhancement.
Absolutely. I heard you say that AI, the stock markets, the AI part of the stock markets is in a rational bubble. Tell me more.
So a bubble means, in my mind, we are over-investing. And at some point, the benefits of what you're investing in aren't going to justify the amount of investment. And I think there's now starting to be an understanding that the money that's being put in AI, some of it will end up in tears. There will be big winners and lots of losers. But it's rational, which is very different from the tulip bubble, because there is productivity enhancement. And because if you look at the micro incentives, the micro incentive for each company is to overinvest for two reasons. If you're a winner, the payoff is enormous. And secondly, there's this concept that if you fall behind, the costs of catching up are prohibitive. So if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to make a mistake of overinvestment than underinvestment. So that's the rational part of it. The good news is we, as ultimate consumers, are going to benefit from this intense competition. It's like an arms race right now among those that are at the frontier of this. And unless you're Google, where you have multiple sources of revenue, where you have engineering excellence, where you have built-in collaboration, you're likely to lose this race, this AI war.
I love how you explain things, and it's not just me. Millions of people tune in, listen to, wait for you to know what the markets is going to do tomorrow. Do you feel the weight of responsibility?
That's very kind. I never think of this. What I try to do, and I do this especially with my social media, is share my thinking, because I often get reactions that benefit me enormously. So, I remember someone telling me when I left PIMCO, where I was surrounded by really smart people, that I now had a new community of smart people. But there was a difference with that community, which is much bigger, and not everybody is particularly nice.
No.
But if you understand that this is just part and parcel of interacting with that community, you can get a lot of good out of it.
I use the Bloomberg Anywhere on my phone, and you get the quote of the day. I opened it yesterday and I want to read this for you. It said, opinion has caused, this is Voltaire, not me, opinion has caused more trouble on this little earth than plagues and earthquakes. How do you feel when you put out an opinion? How do you anticipate or imagine how do you try to put yourself in the place of the receiver when you're writing it, when you're putting it out?
So one of the most common criticism of me is I don't express enough strong opinion. Often I will tell you, these are the facts, and these are different ways of interpreting the facts. And I hold off on the final point, which is this is how you should interpret the facts. And I do that for two reasons. One, I think it's really important to solicit reactions. So you don't want to be in people's faces too much with this is how you think. I can tell you what to think about, and then you help me think. That's the first reason. The second reason is you've got to be very careful, because there are two levels to opinion. There's conviction, how strongly you express that opinion, and there's foundation. How strongly do you feel about that opinion? And often people express a lot of conviction with a little foundation. And you've got to be sure that you've got to have a very high level of foundation if you're going to express fun. So I think in my 10 years that I've been on social media, I've only used capital letters 3 times.
Okay, and yeah.
When I felt really strongly about something.
But do you not feel that economists have a duty beyond neutrality?
I think economists have an important duty to try and put things in a framework and convey that framework. They also need to be much more humble. You know, I remember a very important episode for economics. It was November 2009. November 2008. We were still in the midst of the financial crisis and the Great Recession. Queen Elizabeth at the time was invited to a gathering at the London School of Economics, full of economists. And they explained to her what had happened during the global financial crisis and what were the consequences. And the consequences, millions of jobs being lost. And she looked at them and said, why didn't you see it coming? And that's a really humbling question. Here is a major event that changed the lives of many and that had a very long tail. It has influenced society for a very long time. And yet most economists didn't see it coming. And I think that's a really humbling thing to remind people of.
Do you have an answer to that question?
Yes, I do. I think that economics for a very long time has been held hostage by what I call the high priests of a certain economic approach, which is neoclassical, which wants to look scientific. And in trying to look scientific, it assumes away major element of human behavior. So it never embraced behavioral economics like it should. It never embraced finance as it should. And the result of that is, while it was seeking sophistication, it lost a handle on reality, and therefore it has missed major events. That is changing. Economics now understands it has to be much more multidisciplinary because it's trying to explain how people react.
You said you only used large caps on social media a couple of times. Do you think it's more dangerous to be more cautious or more forceful?
It's more dangerous to be more forceful. It is much more appealing to be forceful because you will attract a lot more attention, especially in a world that looks at how many likes you have, how many followers you have. So yes, there's no doubt that this is a world that encourages you to go beyond what you really have support for, because that's the nature. In fact, the cautious people are the people who tend to get criticized, but I think that's the more responsible thing, okay? That because lots of times you simply only know 80% of the issue, and the remaining 20% can be important.
I sat not too long ago with chief economist of one of the large financial institutions in this world, off the record, and he mentioned that a certain amount of censoring is coming into play, that he is actually finds himself self-censored at times. What do you think of that?
I think that is the reality. I worked for a financial institution in London before PIMCO, and you have constraints on you, and that's reality. That's why I like it being outside everything now. Okay, that you're able not to self-censor, but if you're in an organization, you will. Okay, and part of that organization will expect you not just to self-censor, but will expect you to promote a certain point of view.
Yes, it's the way of the world.
And it happens in government as well.
Yes, it is the way of the world. So if you were to whisper into the ear of a young Arab economist at the moment, economist or policymaker, what mindset would you say was essential to thrive in this era of constant disruptions?
Open-mindedness. Okay, ability to sit back and look at a whole range of opinion and be open to what different points of views bring to it. I'll change slightly. When I was CEO, I used to have once a month a meeting where our human resources department would choose people from around the company. And I told them I want them across the age spectrum, across functions. And we would sit in a room for an hour and a half, and it was known as a safe zone. The first 45 minutes, I would be asking questions. And then the last 45 minutes, I would go around the table and say, what should I know that I don't know? And I learned more about the company and about what we need to adjust from listening to people who normally would not have the ability and sometimes not the willingness, because they would be afraid to express opinion openly. So it is this, I would say to any young person, keep your ears open and force yourself to listen to different points of views, even the ones that make you uncomfortable.
Sure. Do you follow the markets constantly? Are you always looking at what the markets are doing?
Yes, it's a bit of a passion. So it is the second thing after my cup of coffee that I do every morning. And sometimes, I must admit, during the night, I will wake up and I will look at my Bloomberg.
Yes. Okay.
Anywhere.
So are markets still rational? We're in an era of algorithms, passive flows.
So I'll give you an answer with an own experience. I was for 15 years in the public sector at the International Monetary Fund. And then I went from there to work for an investment bank in London. And my boss was a 25-year-old trader. And I was in my early 40s.
Yeah.
And he said to me the following. He said, there are times when I will solicit your opinion, because the markets will be trading according to fundamentals, according to rationality. There are other times when, if you come not close to me, I will do this, which means don't come anywhere near me, because the markets will be trading according to technicals. There will be some technicals. There'll be someone in trouble trying to sell all their holdings, and they'll be doing that at irrational prices. There'll be someone, on the other hand, a risk-loving bout. That would means that valuation will go beyond what's rational. So no, markets aren't always rational. There are times in which markets are highly technical in nature. And what makes really good investors is for them to understand which regime we're in.
So do you think markets are fit for the challenges we're living? Are they fit for 21st century challenges? Should we be redrawing the blueprint, the map for markets?
That's a great question. I say markets are necessary, but not sufficient. The market system is by far the best system at allocating resources. However, it fails sometimes. There's this notion of market failures. Sometimes it's too short term. It doesn't look beyond. Other times there's coordination problems. So there are reasons why markets fail, which means they are necessary but not sufficient. And you need to have, in addition, something that goes with it. So obviously, regulation to stop bad behavior is necessary on that. But also, there are times when you need public-private partnerships. There are times when you need the public sector involved. So I think of it as it should be a major contributor to the allocation of resources, but that you should also recognize that it failed, just like government fails.
Yeah. Some will argue there's too much regulation in some markets.
There are parts of the world where there are too much regulation. Yes. And like we saw in the global financial crisis, there are parts of the world where you get too little regulation.
Yeah.
So it's a balance. And the challenge for regulators, which is a consequential challenge, is to keep up with market developments. When I was at PIMCO, I remember I would meet with regulators. They did not really understand what was going on at all, because there would be new types of financing that have emerged. There would be behaviors that they cannot see. So it's really important for regulators to keep up. This is a very dynamic world.
And what sort of future risks remain catastrophically, if you like, mispriced?
I mean, the biggest future risk is we don't price in what markets don't achieve. So, for example, climate change. Markets don't price that in well. Inequality and social divisions, the need for more inclusiveness, markets don't price that in well. So it is what markets by their nature cannot price in, that those are major risks.
These are the truths that remain mispriced or not priced.
They are fundamentally mispriced. And that is why you need some sort of government intervention to price the future. There is a tendency for all of us to be very short-term and not to take seriously our responsibilities to future generations. And I'll never forget, in December of 2007, so just 10 months before the global financial crisis, one of the CEOs of the major American bank came to see me. And I asked him, where are we in the cycle? And he drew an upside down U. And I said, where are we? He said, near the top.
Wow.
And I said, how are you positioned? He said, maximum risk on. I said, wait a minute, if we're near the top, meaning there's a bottom coming, how could we maximum risk on? He said, 3 reasons, Mohammed. First, I don't know exactly where the top is. Second, I am judged on the short term. So if it turns out the top is in a year's time, I will be punished by my shareholders every quarter until then. And thirdly, everybody else is maximum risk on. So here's a situation where there was a perception that we were near the top, and yet the whole system was maximum risk on, okay? Because the incentives were short term. So there is a problem with the incentives. They tend to be too short term. And it's a particular problem when it comes to our kids and our grandkids, because they're not pricing in their reality, which they should be doing.
So what are the levers that can be used? I mean, let's talk a little bit about the role of central banks and how central banks are at the moment. Aren't they being weaponized? And how dangerous is that?
So I think central banks in general are the least weaponized. If you look at trade, that's been weaponized. Investment sanction, that's been weaponized. Industrial policy, that's been weaponized. Central banks still have the benefits in many countries of being relatively or totally independent. And that's important. But they are struggling. They are struggling for a few reasons. One is the way the economy is functioning is changing, and therefore their forecasts are less accurate. And then you have the legacy of things that they didn't adjust in the past. I always point out, how is it that the Federal Reserve in the last 5 years has had 5 officials accused of financial irregularities? Not all proven, but that shouldn't happen. And that's because the compliance culture hasn't evolved as much. So part of the advantage of the independence is they don't get weaponized. The disadvantage is they're not held as accountable as other organizations would be.
I read somewhere that the independence of the central bank has ended without a formal admission of it having been ended.
Yeah, I think that's going too far. I think there's this fear among economists of what's called fiscal dominance, which is this notion that public debt has become so large that the fiscal authorities will put pressure on the central bank to have interest rates that are lower than they would be otherwise. But if you ask people, I see that as a concern. Is it happening now in the most independent central banks? They'll tell you not yet. So the not yet suggests worry, but it's not happening as yet.
So looking at the system, where do you see fragility at the moment?
So the lack of growth is a major issue. The fact that there's a chance that even the growth that we have will decouple from jobs. And that's a risk with AI, as we mentioned earlier. And jobs are really important for social stability. And then the third issue is inequality. We are living in a world that tends to reward people, and these rewards tend to be highly concentrated. The answer, of course, to all this is growth that is inclusive and sustainable. And I think that has become the number one agenda for many, many countries.
I was on the phone to a friend in the US a couple of days ago, and he said to me something, and I said, I'm going to use that in my interview with محمد العريان. And he said, the rich are getting richer and everybody else is working for them. Do you agree?
I hear that. And it's a problem. And my response to people who are getting rich is a simple sentence. You cannot be a good house in a challenged neighborhood. True. The neighborhood matters. So don't think that you can exclude yourself from what else is happening on there. And I think the people in New York, for example, are learning this lesson with the election of a mayor whose main argument was affordability. That affordability was leaving most of New Yorkers behind, right? And it's important.
That applies to neighborhoods, that applies to countries as well. So globally, are we going to move forward? Are we going to see this growth that we aspire for that's going to solve many of the problems that we live today if we have this inequality?
Only if we change the way we're doing lots of things.
Like what?
Even the house neighborhood effect matters. It matters because of migration. So it does matter whether there is convergence in the rest of the world or whether they're being left behind. In a world in which people are left behind, that's a more unstable world, and that's a world which will end up by having consequences not only for those left behind, but those who think that they're fine. So we are living in that dynamic right now, but this is not an engineering problem. It's a leadership problem. Okay, so if you look at what is required, I think people understand what policies are required. You need just leadership at the national level, and you need coordination at the international level.
And these politics are taking markets hostage.
Yes, they're taking market hostage because we're now living in this world of geo-economics. It's probably the fastest growing field within economics. And it starts with the principle that economic outcomes are no longer determined by economic logic and commercial logic. Increasingly, they're being determined by geopolitics, national security, and domestic politics.
And the global capital flows have been rewired by these geopolitics. So where are we seeing forward flow and where are we seeing backward flow?
So the minute you rewire trade, you will rewire investments, because trade is the tip of the spear. So you're seeing, for example, in the advanced countries, in the US, you're seeing the investment go much more into so-called friendshoring. So you set up companies in countries that are regarded as friends, even if it's more expensive to produce there.
Yeah.
In the rest of the world, you're seeing new channels of trade. So in the Middle East-India channel is becoming very important. And you're seeing increasing Middle Eastern investments in India, in Indian ports, in things like that. So yes, I mean, you are seeing a reconfiguration of foreign direct investment that's a function of the rewiring of trade.
So you've watched the GCC for a while now. How do you see this shift to the GCC, this change from the oil-dependent economies to more service-dependent economy? And how do you read the current situation?
So the GCC is at a very exciting stage collectively, and within that, different countries are at different levels. I want to stress there's a lot of disparity within the GCC. You know, they're not one. And that's, we're talking about 6 countries here. I think the first thing you observe is that domestically, there is an enormous energy for reform that we haven't seen before. And there's enormous self-confidence about implementation. So you're seeing changes happening really quickly. And there's a basic understanding as to what the objective is. So the objective is clear. The journey to that objective is being accelerated, and the rewards are being seen. That is domestically, but internationally, the GCC, and in particular, 2 countries within the GCC, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are what are called swing factors. That they are in a position, because they are special, to be able to navigate the China-US tensions better than anybody else. They're able to maintain relationships with both, which most countries cannot maintain relationships with both. And that puts you at a particularly important position. And then, of course, there's the wealth that's being used to accelerate the domestic reforms. So this is the moment, if you like, for the GCC. And if you look at the amount of investments that are coming and being attracted, and the amount of people, you know, it's very hard to get a flight these days to the GCC. You realize that there's a lot of understanding internationally about this very special position that the GCC is in right now.
So as the magnet is shifting from traditional Western investment opportunities and hubs towards Asia and Middle East, the Gulf, the GCC, what do you see here as the opportunities that are being missed, but also what are the risks that are overlooked by investors coming into the region?
So I don't think as much there are opportunities that are being missed as much as implementation varies enormously among the 6 countries. I think the UAE and Saudi Arabia are at the forefront, and they're setting an example for other GCC countries as to the path ahead. The risks for investors coming in is that they don't understand the region enough, and they're too short term.
So how can they understand it better?
I think by partnering it with local people. You know, this notion of the outside expert that gets parachuted in, right? And we in this region have this notion that somehow, if it's a Westerner, then by definition, they must know more than us. Okay, what we call the الخواجة. Okay, you know, it's not. You need a lot more partnerships, and you're seeing the intelligent foreign companies are the ones that are seeking partnerships.
Is there a particular form to this partnership that you think is more successful than others?
Just understand what each brings to the party. You know, if you ask the partnerships that don't work, and there's lots in China that didn't work, joint ventures that really ended badly, is because people didn't understand what both sides brought to the table and what's complementary about it. So fundamentally understanding what both sides bring is really important.
Yeah, and not come in wanting to use the other party,
correct.
But
absolutely
hand in hand.
That's critical.
That is critical. So for you, from the IMF to Harvard to PIBCO to Cambridge, what weight of responsibility is managing money at that scale? Did you sleep much during those days?
No, I mean, if you take seriously your responsibilities, at PIMCO, we managed $2 trillion, and those were the retirement savings of people.
Yeah.
Right. And you think the responsibility that's given to you. At Harvard, it was the endowment that would fund the university for future generations of students. So no, I must say I did not sleep well at all on there, because you do feel that responsibility enormously.
And you've lived and worked through global crises, whether it is the Asian or the Latin American, and everything in between and after. In times of crisis, what do you trust more, the process or your intuition?
Both. Let me give you an example.
Yes, please.
The weekend before Lehman Brothers went down in September 2008, and we started the global financial crisis really in a big way, and then the Great Recession that followed. We were all gathered in the investment committee room at PIMCO. And if you read the history, it says that PIMCO predicted the global financial crisis because it did very well for its clients. Here's the reality. And it's a reality that Bill Gross, the founder of PIMCO, and myself have been repeating, but somehow nobody wants to realize that we didn't predict it. We had 3 scenarios on the whiteboard. One, scenario A, was that Lehman would not fail. And the argument was very simple. In 6 months earlier, another investment bank, Bear Stearns, had been in the same position, and it got taken over by JP Morgan. And suddenly there was no longer a big risk to the system because a very strong bank took over a weak bank. And we knew that Lehman was in discussion with 2 other banks that weekend. The second scenario was that Lehman would fail, but fail in an orderly fashion. And the argument was simple. No policymaker would let Lehman fail in a disorderly fashion, because they would undermine the payments and system. And if you undermine the payments and settlement system, you cause a heart attack to the economy. So no policymaker would ever take that risk. And the third was that Lehman would fail in a disorderly fashion. 15 people in the room. We asked all 15 to give different percentages to the 3 scenarios, and we added them all up and averaged them.
Okay.
Scenario A, Lehman would not fail, 85%.
Wow.
Scenario B, Lehman would fail in an orderly fashion, 12%. Scenario C, what happened, 3%.
Wow.
So the notion that we predicted the global financial crisis was completely wrong. We gave it a 3%, but we had disciplined ourselves, and this is where the process comes in. We had disciplined ourselves to specify who would do what under each scenario. So when Lehman failed in a disorderly fashion, we knew which lawyer we're going to move, how we're going to reestablish our swap positions, how we were going to inform clients. We had a whole plan that we put in place, even though we had given it 3% probability. And I think that's where the process prevailed on there. And it was a very important, because first mover advantage is huge in crises.
What did all that teach you, all these crises teach you about human behavior under pressure?
If you don't think about the bad state of the world when things are calm, you won't be able to do it when there's a crisis. Because by definition, crisis management is very high frequency respond, very high. And there are things that you need to force yourself to go back and think about, to also do. You know, it's the whole thing between tactical and strategic. You cannot be just one, you have to be both. But in a crisis, you are pushed completely in the tactical world. You know, in my young age, you know, I was lucky enough to be promoted at a very young age at the IMF, and suddenly I was managing 200 people, and I had never managed anybody before. And the IMF was smart enough to realize that if you're going to promote people on technical expertise, you better give them support on management. So I had this coach that would come in once a week, and he would sit with me and said, you know, what are you struggling with? And he would teach me tricks. And he taught me a very simple trick, which is whenever you look at something, ask 2 questions. Is it urgent? And is it important? And what you find is we're very good at knowing what's urgent and important. We're very good at not doing what's not urgent and what's not important. But where the big challenge comes between important but not urgent, urgent but not important. And if you're not strategically anchored, you will be in the important but not urgent, and in the urgent but not important.
Yeah.
You need to be anchored by process to be in the important but not urgent.
So for me, I can, if I'm facing a crisis and I decide what's urgent, what's important, but anyone else coming in to tell me what to do or impart an opinion, I will tell them to leave me alone. I know what to do. Managing and leading a team, 200 people or more, is not easy. What is the moment, what is the moment that tested you the most as a leader?
So first of all, a very important thing is what you do before then. Before the crisis.
Before the crisis.
So hiring is very important. You know, I used to have an additional question that I would ask any hiring committee. Is this the person we want on our team when we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? Right? And that's really important because in crisis management, you want people to be able to think outside the box on that. So how you constitute the team is really important. And this notion that one person will know it all, maybe, but it's, you know, in my lifetime, I've maybe met 2 or 3 people that I will put in that category. And then I've met thousands that I wouldn't put anywhere near that category. So having a team that operates together, that's not afraid of challenging the groupthink is really, really important.
Was there a moment that you feel tested your leadership?
I'll give you an example from another thing. When I was appointed as president of Queen's College and Cambridge University, it was the midst of COVID. So we decided that we saw that our students from more difficult backgrounds, less privileged backgrounds, risked falling behind. So we created a COVID fund to support, you know, they were at home, to support Wi-Fi, to support computers, things that they needed to keep up that they may not have because their parents were facing very difficult situation. And I remember we were on Zoom, of course, and I was meeting with the group of small leaders of the college called the senior officers. And the question came up, what conditions should we attach to these funds? And I took the original, you know, the traditional approach. We should have a list of uses and they have to apply that.
Okay.
And one of the leaders who was talking to a brand new president says, that's arrogant.
To the president?
To the president, wow. That's arrogant.
Okay.
And I said, Professor, why is that arrogant? And he said, because we can't possibly know what the needs are. We have to have an open mind. And I said, what do you suggest? He said, we will meet any need. And I said, do you know that results in abuse? And he said, President, would you rather have 5 people abusing the scheme or 1 deserving student's not getting it? To which I said, you know, you have a point, let's try it for a few weeks. The next day I called him. I said, Professor, you were absolutely right. He said, what are you talking about? He said, I have asked to look at the request coming in. I have a request here from one of our female students who shares her bedroom with 2 of her sisters, according to the application, who has no surface to work on. And what she's asking for is for us to help her buy a folding chair and a folding table. So that
which would never have been on your list of uses.
Would have never been on my mind.
Yeah.
So I think what's important is to create a safe area where someone is willing to say to the leader, I don't think that's right. And the leader should have enough self-confidence to say, why is that?
So last question on leadership. If you were to sum up your leadership philosophy, what is the محمد العريان rule on leadership?
First, don't lead by fear. I've worked by people who lead by fear. I think that is very destructive. Second, don't think you can lead because you're brilliant and everybody else will follow you. Leader of like Apple had, with Steve Jobs, okay, be a very inclusive leader. And I think I always try to benefit and bring in the people that I work with, because for me, that's the best sort of leadership that works for me.
Okay, I see you getting a little bit anxious because markets are close to opening. Let me ask you this. Outside of the world of markets and policy, what brings you joy? Real joy?
Spending time with my family, my daughters, and my wife. By far, that brings me a tremendous amount of... You can put me in a room with them, and even if we're not doing anything, I derive enormous amount of joy.
So when the world is going upside down and in every other direction, what centers you?
What centers me is I always ask the question, I don't have grandkids yet, but what would be in the interest of my kids and my grandkids? Because I think that is a really important question to ask over and over again.
Is it not tiring to keep questioning everything all the time?
When I was 10 years old, my mother told me that if I didn't have something to worry about, I would invent things. And she's right. I did a sleep study 10 years ago.
Okay.
Where you go to a sleep clinic, because I sleep very badly. You go to a sleep clinic and they wire you and then they observe your sleep. And then 2 days later, I come back to talk to the doctor. And the doctor said, I have good news and I have bad news for you. I said, what's the good news? He said, it's not life-threatening. Okay. It's not apnea, right? This is not about life-threatening. This is about quality of life. And your problem is that your brain doesn't shut off. But I can give you drugs to help you shut off. And I said, what are the side effects of the drugs? And he told me the side effects. I said, no, thank you. So, I've been wired by this questioning all the time. And it has disadvantages, is that I don't sleep very well.
Not good. That's not good.
That's
because what science tells us today, what we know today, is that sleep is the number one priority for a healthy and long life. And like someone said to me once, she said, we all want to die young as late as possible.
Yeah, that's right. So you and I were in a discussion recently where, we use different things that assess our sleep. I use this Oura ring. Yeah. You use, what's it called?
The Whoop.
The Whoop. And I remember both of us saying to the person that it has changed our behavior. So yes, now I actually pay much more attention to the quality of my sleep. It's better than what it was, but it's not where I want it to be.
Going back to your head when you're making decisions, how do you stop yourself from second guessing? How do you stop yourself from... Well, and you're an economist, you're always saying on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you always have, distill everything down to two sides.
I ask an additional question, which is, if you end up making a mistake, which is the most recoverable mistake. So most people are paralyzed by what I call a 55-45 or 60-40, when one side doesn't dominate, because they look at the consequences of what they're missing out on, the so-called FOMO, fear of missing out. Yes. But if you can correct your mistake quickly, you worry less about that. So I always ask the second question, which is, if I make a mistake, which of the 55-45 or 60-40 is less recoverable? And I will not go with that option.
Very rational. I imagine you like a kung fu master. Cool, composed, focused. Do you stress? Do you get stressed?
Oh, you need to be with me in an airport and you will see.
I was with you in an airport.
Yeah, but we didn't have, my family always makes fun of me.
Yeah.
That I want to be at the gate 2 hours before my flight. I want to be standing in line an hour before my flight.
Right.
Okay. No, I do stress, believe me.
Yeah. Another question is, do you suffer from imposter syndrome?
All the time.
Really?
All the time.
After all these successes and achievements and books and awards and...
All the time. All the time. I keep on, what am I doing here? Right? All the time.
How is that?
I just do.
What's your next ambition?
It's my constant ambition, which is something that my father instilled with me, is to do whatever I can to help people who need help. It's that simple.
So how do you define success?
By helping people who can benefit from that help.
You're also very grounded and very modest, and it's not just me saying this is what is out there about anyone who mentions your name. This word always comes up. So how does it not go to your head? How do you tame the ego?
Because if you have a constant imposter syndrome, it will not go up to your head at all.
That's true.
So no, that is not something that has been a problem with me. I've had the opposite problem, which is people say you're not self-confident enough. You don't ask for things. You tend to hold back when other people would be asked. I remember early in my career at the IMF, we had what's called the job grading exercise, which is you described everything you did, and then they would grade your job. And my boss called me and Patrick, who was someone who did exactly the same work as I did. And he came in and he said, I looked at what both of you wrote. Patrick, according to you, you run the institution. And Mohammed, according to you, you're irrelevant to the institution. Now, I know what you two do. Go out and take the average of these two, because the average of these two is the right answer.
I have two questions that are fighting to come out at the same time about being relevant. A movie I watched last week, there was a line in it, and it reminded me of you and our discussion when we met at that airport, and you told me how important your girls are in your life, your daughters are in your life. And this line in the movie goes, as parents, we are successful as parents when we become irrelevant in our children's lives. And perhaps that also applies to when you're working for big institutions that are in service of populations.
So that's true. I mean, you hear it in business about succession all the time. Okay, making sure that when you leave, the institution doesn't miss a beat because you've thought about succession. You hear this about people who institutionalize their skills to make sure that the institution as a whole can do this. So that is really, really important in terms of good leaders. I don't know if I apply it completely to parents. So you certainly want to make yourself irrelevant to certain things. You want them to stand up on their own, but you don't want to be completely irrelevant to their life.
Yes.
Because I think that you will continue to have emotional relevance, even if you don't have financial relevance or other types of relevance.
So you're not ready to be irrelevant in your daughters' lives yet?
No.
Hopefully you never will be. It's wonderful to have this kind of relationship with them. Looking out 12 to 18 months, if you give me an idea of how you see the future, what's your base case for global growth?
So first, let me tell you, I am as excited as I've ever been in my career, because the tails of the distribution, what can go really well and can go really badly, are unusually fat. That we are living in a world right now where there are many, many moving pieces. You call it an unstable equilibrium, that this can flip, and that requires you to look at every single bit of data that you can look at and talk to lots of people. I spend a lot of time these days talking to people in technology to understand what's going on. So I just want to stress that I will tell you what I think is ahead of us, but I will also tell you that I could change my mind tomorrow. What's ahead of us is we're going to have a year of dispersion, where growth-wise, the US will leave behind Europe. Europe will continue to feel it's falling behind. And within the emerging world, we're going to see a massive range of outcomes. The GCC will do really well. There are parts of Africa that will really struggle going forward. We are going to see inflation stuck at levels above where central banks want them to be. And we're going to see the continued rewiring of the global economy that makes it feel really unstable.
There's been a lot of talk recently about de-dollarization in the last few years, with sanctions being imposed on certain countries, locking some users outside of the dollar system, and also the tariffs that were involved on some countries have encouraged this idea of de-dollarization. Do you see that happening? Do you see the dollar losing its status ever?
So the dollar will never lose its status as, never is a strong word. In the next 20 years, the dollar will not lose its status as the main reserve currency, simply because you cannot replace something with nothing. If you look at other currencies, whether it is the euro, whether it's a Chinese currency, whether it's crypto, it's very hard to see them displace the dollar. But what the dollar will lose its influence as a reserve currency. And you're seeing it already. It is a smaller portion of international reserves of certain central banks. More of the payment system happens in other currencies. So yes, the dollar will maintain its reserve currency status, but its influence will be less than what it has been historically.
And digital currencies, is that a reality?
I think that's a decision that has to be made. Right now, the easy thing is to continue to be linked to the dollar, either formally or informally. And that, you know, as often as that is discussed, it always ends up with the same conclusion. Is it the best? No, but no one can figure out what's better than it. So I suspect that we will continue to see the currencies linked to the dollar.
And certain currencies are still pegged to the dollar.
Correct.
Here in the Gulf region.
Some formally, some informally.
Some formally, some informally. Should the Gulf states continue to peg to the dollar?
For now, yes, but this is something that has to be discussed on a regular basis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.